Hi guys, and welcome back to the podcast. Today we have a very special guest on. We're welcoming on Luke Bright. Luke is a friend of mine from Bali, who I met originally, but we are in London at the moment. So, Lukey, thanks a million for jumping on.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Robbie. Good to be here.
Good, it is. Yeah, it was a long time, I suppose, in the making. But to talk first, do you want to give a bit of an introduction about who you are, what you're working at the moment, where you're set, I suppose? Maybe some of your philosophy around training.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, perfect. So, my name is Luke. Originally from the UK. Grew up kind of here for 18 years. Went to university, did all of that, and then really kind of went into the corporate world after that. Joined like Sony Music and then Google after that. And was at Google for 3 years or so. Had a great time. Kind of learned everything there is about. Well, not everything there is, but a lot about marketing and the whole Google ecosystem. And then, left that and started basically freelancing and then building up my own marketing agency, which is what I'm doing now. Working with a bunch of clients to basically grow e-commerce companies and brands internationally and across the world, across Google, YouTube, and other platforms as well.
Very interesting. And with Google, so I know you were based in Dublin originally with the lads. Yeah. So what's the Google headquarters in Dublin is supposed to be like one of a kind in terms of like the world, isn't it? It's a very unique setup. How did you find working there?
Yeah, to be honest, I couldn't have asked for a better job during those first few years. It was almost like an extension of university. So, for example, you had... it was like a big campus, so there was like 7 restaurants there. You could pick whatever cuisine you wanted on a certain day. You know, menu was released each day, which was great.
Free?
Yeah, all free. Yeah,
nice.
Yeah. And then breakfast, lunch, and dinner as well. And then there was a swimming pool on site, table tennis tables, snooker tables, and then obviously a gym as well, which was very popular. So it was kind of like even like sleeping pods. So all the stuff that you hear here and there, it was all there. Meditation room, massage rooms, like all this stuff. Yeah, it was an interesting experience. Yeah.
Could you get a free massage every day then? Technically.
Yeah, you basically got like credits that you could use. So you could have it worked out probably like a few per quarter, I think, something like that. You could also buy more with certain credits as well. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
And what was the idea of the layout or laying out the company like that? What was the benefit of having the company set up in that sort of way?
I think they really, to be fair to them, they really focused a lot on well-being and making sure that you were at your best. And the way that, because also included in that as well was kind of your dentist was on site. They had like a GP on site as well. So it was really kind of looking after you, and then that's how you get the best out of the people that work for you, I think. So I'm a big believer in that now, because I think it definitely does kind of all add up, because I've also worked at other places where it's definitely the opposite to that, and that's definitely demotivating. So I've kind of seen both sides there, you know. Interesting.
And is there a level of it that sparks more creativity, do you reckon? Obviously Google is known to be is a creative hub. Is there a level of the layout that it helps to spark creativity, or do you think that's more in like the meeting rooms and how they structure?
Yeah, I think so, definitely, because you have your desk and the floor that you work on with everyone else, where probably you spend most of your time. But there's so many kind of, how would you say, like nooks and crannies and different places you can go all over the office. So when you do need that time where, okay, I need an hour here to really focus, so you go to an area where it's really quiet, just by yourself, and then really kind of tune in and get in like a flow state for an hour or so to accomplish that, you know.
And okay. It's very interesting, because a lot of companies, when you think of the design, now I was never really involved in the corporate world that much, only different work environments up along, but like you think of, you have your cubicle and then you're resigned to your cubicle and you work there until 9 till 5 and you finish up and you go home. Was that the case then in that company, or did you have like your specific cubicle and you could work in loads of different areas, or was it just an open platform altogether?
Yeah, it was you kind of did a bit of both. Like if you're away from the desk for too long, then you'd kind of there was always a sense of like, okay, I probably should go and spend some time at the desk again, you know, interact with all the colleagues in your team and whatnot. It was kind of one of them where act accordingly as to, and don't take the piss, basically.
Yeah.
You know, kind of like that. So it's like if you spent like 8 hours by yourself in the office and no one saw you all day, it would be like, well, where have you been? You know.
Really? Yeah.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. So it's kind of, you had to kind of act accordingly to that hybrid kind of model. Yeah.
And how did they then, I guess, spark creativity in meeting rooms? What way did they design that? Because obviously they didn't just think of the office layout. I can imagine that they thought of like a management system and the system of like layout for workers and people who were there to get more creativity out of them, I guess, or to come up with more out of the box ideas. Like what did they? Was there any particular things that stood out to you that they did?
Yeah, good question. I think even certain things like certain floors had different themes, certain meeting rooms had different themes as well. Not that anything was crazy, but there was definitely different kind of concepts and designs almost on every floor, let alone every building, which I think definitely helped with stimulating creativity. I think in some ways the ways that meetings were done as well was quite good. A certain format, even like the sales training, that's kind of where I sat in the sales team. There was a certain process of how the best way to do things to kind of learn. So I think collaboratively the whole thing, and obviously I think as well the people were kind of one of the main things really, and creative people create more creativity, and creative people, I think it all kind of adds together. Yeah.
The Google, I know we will go on and talk about other things, but it's obviously a very interesting thing for people who are outside of that environment, who haven't seen it. The Google hiring process is supposed to be fairly unique in itself.
Yeah. I've kind of sat on both sides, where obviously in the interview and to join, but then also doing interviews as well.
Okay.
So that was quite interesting just to see both sides really, but it was quite rigorous. A few, like I think 5 or 6 stages, and then you go through the whole process, like different stages of that, and then it gets sent off to like the hiring committee, which is a separate board in USA, and they kind of go through your whole package and look at all your interviews, and then make a unbiased decision on whether you should basically pass or not.
Really? Yeah.
Yeah.
How do they do that? Like what does the interview, like what are they asking you in the interview? I remember seeing crazy questions and I didn't know if that was true or not. Like why did it make a manhole round, stuff like that. Like obviously that's a bit more.
Yeah, or like how many golf balls can they fit in a Boeing 747 or something, Yeah.
Did you ever?
Or like how many hotel beds are there in London? Luckily I never got asked any of that though. But I know that in like management consulting, they definitely still ask that. Like McKinsey, Bain, Boston Consulting Group, and Google used to do that, I think. But when I was there, I never really got any questions like that. It was more kind of, some of it was product knowledge, like what's remarketing, for example. But I felt a lot of it, maybe I was just quite lucky with the interviews, but a lot of the people were actually just quite human, and it was kind of almost became like a conversation.
Okay.
Maybe it helped because it was kind of sales, so you had to be good at connecting with people, and that's what they were testing, and how to sell a certain product, how to communicate. They were all key skills they were looking at, I think.
Any questions or that stuck out to you that you were like, that you thought about after? Geez, how did I come up with that? Or maybe at the time that you had to think about a bit more?
Yeah, there was one I got asked, which was quite random, which was, it was something like, who's someone that you really look up to? Or like a role model, who's been your role model all your life? And I did the classic of like, I thought up Steve Jobs in an instant.
Yeah.
I was like, oh shit, I can't say that because this is Google, this isn't Apple. They're gonna. So I had to think really quickly again.
Yeah.
And
Sergey Brin.
I was thought of Bruce Lee, which was so random. I don't know why I thought of this, but I kind of obviously panicked a bit. And they're like, oh yeah, why Bruce Lee then? And I just came up with something on the spot, which was like, I think he's a guy that's mastered both the mind and the body together, and combined the two to become a master of his own universe or whatever, something like that. And
nice. Yeah.
I think I combined that with I got a black belt when I was in karate when I was like 12, so I then combined that together. And I was like, so it's been so I think they must have, they bought it anyway. But
interesting. Okay. And then so like, for a lot of people now at this time, I know it's interesting what we're talking about because of the fact that Google are laying off so many people at the moment. But in terms of like a work-life balance, when people who are in the corporate world would probably look at Google as the most, like at the pinnacle of what a lot of companies are. Obviously everyone has different opinions on things, but in terms of like a work-life balance and a work atmosphere of what they would like to get to. So why was it then that you left there and actually started doing your own thing, considering that the work-life balance or the work balance is supposed to be so good?
Yeah, to be honest, it was mainly just because I got bored.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, it was just, and also you could say like the red tape of things. So it was, even though it was a tech company, it was a massive tech company, and it became quite corporate, and it was quite corporate.
Okay.
So it took a while to do things. There were very defined processes. It was a very like well-oiled machine. So you felt quite, you just felt like a cog, which is the classic thing to say, but it really was like that. And yeah, I just kind of had a yearning for adventure, really. I just felt a little bit like this is number one. It's very, very comfortable. I think that was the big thing.
Yeah.
You had all your meals there. I lived 5 minutes from the office. It was just a very comfortable life. And at the time, I was 25 years old, and I was just like, there's surely more than this that I want to be doing. It's I could happily sit here for another 25 years,
Yeah,
and be absolutely sound, good money coming in, no worries at all. But Jesus, I don't think that's the life for me. Really, I want to go and have some adventures.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's go and have some ups and downs, as opposed to just the straight line on the graph. So that was a big one. So yeah, I actually left to a startup in January 2020, just before COVID, and yeah, I really didn't enjoy that, to be honest. I think I kind of got missold on a certain position a little bit by that startup, but that was anyway the catalyst to go towards what I'm doing now, which is basically freelancing in Bali, then building the agency, basically. Yeah.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, because as I was saying, like, so many people would aspire in a lot of ways to get the work-life balance of what is perceived that you would have at a company, as like a tech company. Like obviously Google, Facebook are the ones that are known for it as well. Twitter, even though now Twitter's starting to have a bit of a collapse since Elon Musk got in there, but
Yeah.
at the same time, like those companies in themselves set themselves up from the outside as they look like they have a perfect balance. But I think, as you just said there, the idea of just being too comfortable all your life has to be like that. I think you need challenge at certain stages. So there's definitely scope for looking for the uncomfortable and then trying to come out of it and build out of it. I think that's a really, really important skill, or a really important thing to do in life. And I think too many people probably look for comfort in a lot of things. And I've talked to people about this on the podcast a lot before, that I think that idea of falling into just the trap of always looking for the comfort, always looking for comfortable things and comfortable scenarios, and never really putting yourself out there, putting yourself at risk, leads for a very mundane style of life, I think. And at the same time, then it's actually funny that on the last two podcasts I've had on, this topic has come up, so people are probably going to be thinking that, Jesus, this guy is he's I don't know, totalitarian or whatever, but probably the wrong word. But he's I think that when you look for comfort too much, I think it definitely you develop weaknesses, a lot of weaknesses in your physical and mental capacity.
Yeah,
I think that's a huge thing. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it does, and you have to kind of take a long-term view on it as well, because in the short term, those things won't show up, because being comfortable in the short term is very, very nice. Everything's taken care of, you're nice and settled, probably not too much emotional up and down at all, but eventually that will grow and manifest into something, either regret in later life for not having gone and done that thing that you really wanted to because you were so comfortable, or it could show up in other ways as well, bad health problems, etc., if someone's not exercising over a long period of time, for example. So I think these things show up in later life. So it's very hard to do, I think, for everyone really, to kind of get that long-term view and put the long-term ahead of the short-term a lot of the time.
I think so as well. And we were talking about it earlier about like how can you, in ways that like we live in a very comfortable society in general. And I think like coming from, we both met in Bali. Bali is a very comfortable place to live. Like everything is pretty streamlined out there. You can live a very easy life. And I think that's kind of the trap of it a small bit as well, in that it's nice to change it up and go somewhere else that's a bit more of a challenge, and then go back then again at different stages. But with that, I think that the better able you are to manage different stressors, the better able you are to cope with stressors in life. And I think that fact that if you are comfortable all the time, that you're less able to deal with stressors. So what are ways that you try to make yourself uncomfortable?
Yeah, I think a big one, which is recently, is I think exercise, but also jumping in the cold. You know?
Yeah.
Jumping in the cold bath, like either the cold shower, the cold bath, or the cold plunge, wherever it is, or a bloody cold lake. You know,
Yeah.
jump in, breaking the ice, and that for me, that's one of the best ones, just because that's when that's probably when these days anyway, I'm at my most uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Obviously, depending on how cold the water is. You know, a nice 5 degree, that will definitely get you.
Oh, would shock you.
But yeah, even 10 degrees or whatever. So I think it's doing things on a daily basis like that. Even with work, pushing through a barrier. You know, there might be a time, especially with what we do, where we can completely, and any other freelancer or business owner, you can completely dictate your time. You're not dictated to by someone else. Like, for example, when I was in the corporate world, someone's kind of telling you where you should be and what you should do. Whereas when you go into self-employed, freelancer, business owner, you're completely at your own discretion of what you should do. And therefore, it's kind of that phrase of like, great power comes great responsibility, you know?
Yeah.
You really have nothing else to lean on. So if you want to go and have a nap at 1 p.m. for 2 hours, you can, you know? But that's actually not going to be good for you, you know?
Well, a half an hour nap, I have to put my hand up and say that.
I actually do that as well. Yeah, it's just when it turns into like, oh shit, that's been 2 hours.
That's been yeah, that's a problem, isn't it? Like,
yeah. But without going on a tangent, there, it's so again, beating that comfort side is it's a case of really pushing yourself through certain barriers, because I think we're, especially at this age, you know, we're around the age of like 27, 28, but even, you know, onwards and even younger than that as well. We really have this vitality to really push ourselves more than we even think we can. I heard something recently which was like, you know, when you feel really, really tired, either after a workout or a day at work, you're only a third of the way done to your full capacity. You know?
Yeah, that's David Goggins has a good thing on that like when people quit at 40% in general, and I think it's definitely true, because when that little voice comes into your head to tell you to stop doing it, like the cold plunge is a perfect example, and as Luke referenced there with the walking into an ice lake, that's what last week I was talking about in the last podcast with Leo Ryan, a podcast that I did maybe 2 weeks ago. And we were talking about the idea of putting yourself into those uncomfortable situations. But last week, when I was going for a dip, we had to walk into the lake that close to us, but it had frozen over completely. So we actually we were going in and we were smashing it, and we were elbowing it as we were going through it. But in the moment, like first off, there's nowhere, like being outside of that lake is the only place that you want to be, like not in there at the moment. And it's the same thing with an ice bath. When you jump into the ice bath, like you're just thinking for a couple of seconds, oh Jesus, like why am I doing this to myself? But if you settle yourself and you're able to control your reaction, that's the skill of it. It's being able to control that reaction as much as possible, and controlling it so that you're thinking, okay, right, it is a moment of being uncomfortable, but then if you look at it from the opposite side, you couldn't be any more present. Like you genuinely could not be any more present, because you're just like, when you jump into the lake, you're not thinking, all right, I need to get this, and this done. Or if you're jumping in an ice bath, you're not thinking, okay, right, I need to get that done later on now. And this, like, it's It's like,
your brain is thinking about survival.
Out and out.
Your brain literally thinks you're dying. Your nervous system thinks you're dying because you've just had this shock to the body out of nowhere. And I think a little tip for the ice bath, not to say I'm a complete expert, but if you go into an ice bath, no matter what the temperature is, only let yourself get out once you've got your breathing back to normal. So find your breath again, which is your normal breath. Only then, and if you want to stay in for 3 minutes, whatever it may be, fair enough. But don't jump out after 10 seconds. Find your breath first, and then jump out, because then you have got comfortable in the ice bath. You've got comfortable in the uncomfortable.
I'd agree with that 100%. Yeah, as in like go to like you don't. It's not a challenge, and I think sometimes people think it's how long they can stay in to the ice bath, but it really isn't until you can get control. And it's the same thing as with the sauna as well. I think a sauna, you need to jump in until you're uncomfortable. Like, you need to get to the point that you're thinking, all right, I need to get out here now. This is tough. And then when you do get to that point, just set another minute on it. I'd say, okay, I'll get 30 seconds more. And see if you can do that 4 times more. Like, all right, I'll get 30 seconds. I'll get 30 seconds.
Yeah.
Like that makes it so much easier and so much more achievable. And it's such a great way of building resilience. It's such a solid way of building resilience. I think that not enough people do that.
Yeah. Yeah. It really is, isn't it? Like, I'm just thinking back to then some, like in Bali when we used to obviously go to the sauna and the plunge. Like, I mean, that was, to be honest, you can't. I love that as a routine every day. Going a few rounds, sauna 20 minutes, 5 minutes ice bath 25, and doing that 2 or 3 times. But remember sometimes when in the stone sauna we'd start piling on the water, wouldn't we? Like 15, 16 scoops, sometimes 20 when no one else is there, because if anyone else is in there, they'll get pissed off with this.
Oh, yeah.
But so it was when like we were just the 2 of us in there. And then I remember like that one time when that guy walked in and it just hit him like a ton of bricks, and he's like, fuck it, and he just walked straight back out.
Oh boy, yeah, I remember that. There was another time a fella had come in and he couldn't find his way to the seat. Do you remember that? There was so much steam that he was trying to back into the seat, like he didn't know where he was going. But yeah, that like, and the thing is, those controllable, like obviously, and I think it's easy to talk from this perspective because like that's a very controllable stress that you're putting on yourself. But people who have had a tough go in life and have had kind of like a lot of issues growing up in life, and maybe they had some childhood problems, like parents split up, or like they've been put through a lot of discomfort. I think that's a challenge for those type of people to say, right, I'm actually going to make myself go into this. And I have to empathize with this, in that I can understand, and I know this from working with foster kids and stuff like that along, is that like that is definitely a challenge for them to be like, I've already been through a lot. Why would I continue to do myself? Why would I continue to put myself through the uncomfortable? And I've seen it, and I see it with people that I've worked with as well, that they have been through a lot, so they're not as inclined to go back to that. But I think that there is a, like, if you can challenge yourself to do that, there's definitely a resilience that you build up, or coping strategies that you build up, like positive coping strategies, like effective ones, if you can continue to do that as you get older. So if you do feel like, okay, I've been through enough already in my life, like I've had a tough go of it, I think that's sometimes a better time to even go after that a small bit more, because then you can learn the times they may have been uncontrolled before, and like times that you've been like, okay, when you think about it after, geez, that was a very significant time in my life that everything was going against me. Why would I ever want to go back to that? But it's a big difference going into a controlled one where you have the ability to step out whenever you want. And I honestly do empathize with that a lot. I know it's a small bit of a change of track, but I think people who have had a tough life coming up along that, even more so, should at times still try to bring themselves to that area. And the only reason I say that is because I know, working with clients, and it's a topic that's come up with clients recently, that's something that they try to avoid because they've been through that already. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, definitely. I think you see it a lot in sport, don't you? Again, for example, CrossFit's a great example. Like a lot of people are kind of going through that, really kind of, because also I think in some ways people love CrossFit for that, because it's measurable.
Yeah.
They can see themselves getting, when you see numbers on a screen, for example, you feel much more in control. So you're really pushing yourself, and then you see yourself getting better as well. That's kind of like you're putting yourself through that difficult time of a workout, but you can also have full control of it and see yourself getting better. Yeah. Similar with an ice bath as well. You see, okay, I did 1.5 minutes today. Yesterday I did just 1 minute. There's improvement there, in the uncomfortable as well. Yeah,
that's actually a great point, because with CrossFit, a lot of the time, like with other sports, like let's say jiu-jitsu, you're against someone else, so you're kind of defecting depending on what their mood is like on that day. Like they could go hard or they could go soft. With CrossFit, you are against yourself a lot. With training, with going to the gym, you're against yourself all the time. So it is bringing yourself to that, as you said, like bringing yourself to that kind of, what's that zone where it's like extremely uncomfortable zone, and then being able to control it, keep it there for a while, see what the numbers are, and the next day testing that a bit more. But yeah, that's an interesting point on CrossFit.
Yeah, I think it's good to, I still haven't worked this out, but whether it's good to just always compete against yourself, or also compete against others. I think it's not good to fully compete against others, but sometimes it is necessary. I think a good combination of the two is quite good. Maybe more lean to competing with yourself, because that is the ultimate journey through life. But I do think there is a place for competing against each other, for example, in jiu-jitsu, because especially if it's a very holistic and welcoming and healthy competitive environment, you can really get the best out of one another. You really can.
Yeah, I think that's a good point actually. Like, what is the balance between competing with yourself and competing against others? I genuinely love both. Like, I really do love both. I think it's, for me, sometimes competing against myself, if it's an unmeasurable thing, it's difficult. But I think competing against others is very measurable, because obviously it depends on, it's different in every aspect, in every facet. Like, it's completely different. But competing against others, especially in like a sport like jiu-jitsu, if you win, like, you've won. So like, if you beat a higher belt, okay, right, so now I'm in a better position. If you lose to a lower belt, okay, there's certain things that I need to improve on here. And I think testing yourself against another person is a nice way of seeing where your skills are at and where your mindset is at. Testing against yourself has the exact same or very similar benefits to it. You can test your mindset. It really is what you're doing when you're going against yourself. It's a lot of it is mindset over a physical capability.
Yeah, completely agree.
Like, runners or ultra runners. My God, I work with a few ultra runners. I don't know how they can do that. Like, run 100 miles. I struggle to run a couple of miles. Like, I have to run after something. Like, I have to be running after a ball. I need to be running after something. But like, to be able to just go out and say, okay, I'm going to run 50 miles today, and I know there's going to be a few of them listening to this. Like, to be able to do that, I think is admirable. I think it's one of the toughest sports out there, because you're just non-stop. You're going like working people who run 24 hours and stuff like that. That's
it's great to see some transformations there as well. One of the best I've seen is who's now he's a guy I met during traveling, only for a brief stint really, but this was in Nicaragua, probably 6 years ago or so, and a guy called Connor from Australia, and he's basically, he was like quite overweight at the time. He's a big lad, and but just living the traveling lifestyle, having fun, and a lot of fun to be around. Great guy, and then lost contact with him, but had him on Instagram, and then I saw fairly recently, probably like a couple of years ago, after a few years afterwards, and now he's like an ultra marathon runner, and he's running just insane distances, 60 miles, whatever it may be.
Crazy, yeah.
And he looks like a different person.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I thought that was, I know it's a slight tangent on the topic, but I saw that and it's great to see.
That's a guy then who's probably noticed that, like, I don't know anything about the guy, but in terms of going from being overweight to running, that is a fella who's after taking control of his mindset, who's actually able to control it. I think that is one of the skills that I admire the most, is that people who have control over their mind, because if you've control over your mind, you've control over your body, and you've control over a lot of your environment. Like, you can really, I suppose it comes back to the idea of knowing yourself and knowing what your capabilities are and stuff. But if you know that you quit early and you say, okay, right, I'm going to just push on for under 5% this time, like, there's very little that can stop you getting to where you want to get to if you just keep consistently going at it. And I think that's the thing, is that a lot of people like say, oh, it's my body that gave up, it was all that, but in one sense, a lot of the time it is the mind that gives up way before the body.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the control of the mind is the big one, isn't it? It really, I think that's what a lot of this life is all about, really. Like, I've realised this a bit recently with currently doing dry jam, like probably a lot of people out there, and one of the big things there, I've realised a few lessons from it, and one of the big ones was, for example, in December, when we talk about dopamine and how your mind is wired, I remember the idea of going to get some pints with friends and whatnot, and your mind gets excited about that, and that's kind of where the dopamine level goes to, like sinking 6 pints of Guinness, for example, right? Which is just the way it was in December, Christmas time, whatever.
For a lot of people,
yeah, exactly. Now it's a different ball game. It's dry January, so that's just not in life anymore at present. So, but it's weird what happens when we talk about like a dopamine detox and these kind of subjects, because now I get the same level of dopamine, it seems, from the thought of and like basically consuming a coffee or thinking about food. It's kind of, it resets a little bit, and it takes less to actually hit that level. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
And I wonder how far down you could go with that. Really, like it's if you kind of restrict certain things in life. Maybe next it's like coffee, and then it's like the clear blue sky that gives you as much dopamine. Just, I know that's quite complex and it's quite random, isn't it? But I've noticed that recently in terms of controlling certain substances that you know are kind of bad for you. Definitely does a bit of a dopamine detox, and then it makes your threshold for that
enjoyment,
enjoyment lower.
But think about it. It makes perfect sense, because like they did a study recently on, like, they were testing out different populations of who are the happiest people in the world, and they found out that the Buddhist monks, which I think you would expect it, but there was one in particular that he was a master of meditation. I think a lot of them are, but this guy was pretty high up in it. I don't know how they measure that. Like, this level's a black belt of meditation anyway at one stage. But he, one of his, like, when you think about that, if you're meditating all the time, if you're in the present moment, everything becomes beautiful then around you. Everything becomes a lot more appealing. As you said, like the blue sky, a sunny day, like just taking care of that. And a lot of the people that I know, especially older people who have lived in the country for a long time, the countryside I should say, for a long time, and have really connected themselves to nature, find the most, like, the smallest things so joyful. Which really, I think, it comes back to that of not looking for major changes, like not looking to go out and drink 6 pints, and not looking to just be adrenaline chasing all the time, just trying to find beauty in the smallest things. And I wonder, does that come back to that idea of, like, they don't need those massive spikes and massive drops. They're just on a nice kind of easy-going level. And a lot of the time with monks, it does come back to that being present and being present and noticing the world around you.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, because there's it depends how far you want to take it as well. Whether it's, drink, cigarettes, all that stuff. I think it does put things out of whack overall, and you miss out on the small stuff then. Yeah.
It's like alcohol, for one way, or for lack of a better phrase, and sometimes can be, you're taking a lot of the enjoyment, a lot of the happiness out of the next day, and you're stuffing it into 3 hours. Like, if you are, like, you could be doing, the next day that you're going to be lazy and you're going to be tired, but you're kind of you're sacrificing that because the night before is going to be that bit more enjoyable if you do it. But if that becomes your go-to all the time, if you rely on these substances and you rely on that to get your enjoyment, which a lot of people do, a lot of people live for the weekend, which I think is, for me, and this is obviously in my own opinion, I know a lot of people that listen to this podcast won't be self-employed, but I think that idea of living for the weekend is a dangerous game. It's a dangerous game, because you're reserving all your energy for the weekend, and then you only have Friday and Saturday night, because Sunday you can't really do anything, so you only have Friday and Saturday night to blow all the energy that you have saved up all week. I think having those little things that you enjoy during the week, even if it's like getting to the gym consistently, if it's going for a walk in nature, meeting up with friends and that, not just meeting up with people to go drinking, meeting up with people just to sit down and have a coffee, enjoy yourself, like go to the park, go for a swim together, play a bit of paddle tennis for any of the ballywads that are listening to this. So that type of stuff, like, that makes all the difference. Like, I think having those little portions of your week is really important, and setting up your lifestyle. And from the look of it, I actually had a client get on to me last week, and she said that work, because she was resigning from work, she was changing jobs, and the work said to her, the place that she was working, they were like, okay, right, let's renegotiate your contract before you resign completely. And they kind of gave her authority over what she wanted her hours to be and what she wanted her lifestyle to be. I think workplaces have to come to that. If they want to keep people for longer, they have to come to that negotiation a small bit more. Like, I think that negotiation around work-life balance needs to be better.
Yeah, definitely. I think the world's going in an interesting place in that regard. I think we'll see an increase of people who are self-employed and therefore mobile geographically, because they gain more and more online skills. I think obviously, it depends who you are and what you want to do. And I know this is going down off on another tangent again a little bit.
No.
Depending on who you are and what you want to do. If you're someone who is a little bit thinking about what you may want to do in the future and you're not too sure about it, learning an online skill I think is a very useful thing to do. Whether it be even if you're a nurse or a teacher and you're fed up with that and you want to change, because I think there's so much value in learning an online skill. And then, I mean, one of the big positives of that is that you can work from anywhere. So you essentially get to earn some money online and work for yourself and dictate your own hours, and then also be geographically mobile. Like, you're going to Buenos Aires tomorrow, Robbie, aren't you, to go and live there?
Yeah,
you know?
today.
Yeah, actually, yeah, today, yeah. Yeah,
About 2 hours.
Flying today, yeah.
Jesus, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean that just says it all, you know. And but that could be anywhere. And I think at a young age, there's nothing really that's impacted me as much as travel has, to be honest. There's been a lot of things that have impacted me, but I think travel has really changed the way of my life, and I'll always be cognizant of that.
Yeah.
You know?
And what do you think is it that, like, in terms of travel, because a lot of people that listen to this podcast will have a family, you know, they'll be settled down and stuff like that. And some of them don't have that same opportunity to go out and to live in another country for a couple of months or for a year or two. Like, what is it that, like, what I think about it is, you do need to. It was a book I read. It was a 4-hour work week years ago, and it was Tim Ferriss. And for anyone who's working in a corporate environment, I think it's a very interesting book to check out, because he talks about it. It's basically a framework or a step-by-step way of moving from the office to remote working and being able to do that. Then he basically talks about taking mini retirements, where you take 3 months off work and then you go back to work, and the refreshment that you have after that. Like, when you come back from a holiday, you feel so generally, like, you'll be tired at times, but you just have a kind of a refreshed mindset. It doesn't need to be a holiday. You don't need to go to Argentina, or you don't need to go to Dubai, or you don't need to go to Bali or anywhere like that. Just going for, like, even a staycation, where you're just going down the road and trying out something new, getting into a new environment. I think you can garner a lot of the same benefits from that, in terms of mental clarity, creativeness, having a better idea of what you want to do, meeting new people, meeting people outside of your circle. Like, really, when you come down into what travel is, in its essence, is basically trying new cultures, checking out new cultures, seeing how other people think, trying different foods. You know, it really just comes down to bringing yourself outside of your comfort zone and outside of your bubble, and seeing what else is out there. And you can do that in lots of ways. I don't think it's, like, for the people who are listening to this and who don't have the opportunity to fly away, I think it's maybe look at joining other communities. What do you think?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's changing the environment, because I think routine is essential, right? Like, routine forms the backbone of your life and just makes most of the things that need to be on autopilot, right? Like, it just helps your life be a well-oiled machine. Whether it be what time you wake up to what time you go to bed and everything in between. But changing that environment helps you break out of a certain pattern to look at things a bit differently. I think I'm a big believer in that, because once you can change your environment and look at things differently, you may think it's something in a different way, or even if you're in a depressed state at the moment, it can actually take you out of that depressed state for a moment, and you can see that there's another way to kind of view things in a certain way, which can help improve the way that you look at things in your life when you go back to it. So I think there's so much to be said for just, even if it is a staycation or going international, changing your environment, and that may be the catalyst to looking at things differently and helping improve your own life.
Perfect. Yeah, I think I'm just looking at the time now, and I need to catch a flight, so I think right now, honestly, thanks a million for jumping on. Really, really interesting podcast, and I think a lot of people will take a lot from that, especially, like, a lot of the learning points, or even the talking points on that. I think for whoever's listening to this to go away and think about it a small bit more, think about how you can break the pattern a small bit, and see how that affects your life. I think that it's something that's a lot of people, like, really, that's the reason that I'm going away and going to these other countries, is to break that pattern and try to kind of see what else is out there. And if you don't have that same opportunity to go away, you can do that. You can do that in your own community by just changing up to maybe the groups that you hang out with a small bit, or joining something new, or trying something new. But for now, Lukey, thank you so much for jumping on.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Robbie.
And really looking forward to the next one. For anyone who was listening to this, I'd love if you could subscribe and rate the podcast. Reach out to Luke on if anyone's looking at it. What's the website? Anyone looking for Google Ads?
Joinupscale.com.
Joinupscale.com. Check that out. If anyone has any questions for Luke, you can just send me a message as well, and I can also get on to him. So, podcast is rebalanced, or this podcast is rebalanced, I should say. You can get me on Instagram at Mobility Tutor. But that is all for now. Okay, guys. Chat to you all again next week.
Thanks, folks.